Okay, so forget everything you've ever heard about philosophy being this, dusty, boring thing. Today, we're diving into the work of a thinker from 200 years ago, Georg Hegel, who handed us a kind of secret key. And believe it or not, this key unlocks some of the biggest puzzles of our modern world, from how quantum physics works to why stock markets crash. So, you ready? Let's turn that key. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to uncover this universal pattern that's hiding in plain sight. Then we'll put it to the test, see it in action in our world. We'll even see how Hegel's biggest critics couldn't help but use his own tools. From there, we'll tackle a huge paradox about free will, see how this all builds a wild bridge between Eastern and Western thought, and finally, we'll hand that key over to you. All right, let's get into it. We're starting by looking for what you could call a hidden grammar of reality. The fundamental set of rules that explains how things grow, change, and become what they are.
I know, it sounds like the beginning of a bad joke, right? You've got a tiny particle that can be in two places at once, a massive stock market bubble that suddenly pops, and that really difficult, sometimes painful process of just becoming a better person. On the surface, they have absolutely nothing in common. But what if they're all just different versions of the exact same dance? The same unfolding pattern?
Well, here it is. This is the secret key. It's called the dialectic. And it's not just some abstract idea. It's a living, breathing process. Think of it like an engine that powers all change. It starts with an idea. That idea runs into its total opposite, they clash, and out of that conflict, something totally new and way more complete is born.
And here's the cool part. This isn't a circle. It doesn't just repeat. It's a spiral, always moving forward and upward. You start with a thesis. That's the status quo, like the neat, tidy world of classical physics. Then, boom, the antithesis shows up, a contradiction that just blows the old way of thinking apart, like the totally bizarre rules of quantum mechanics. The clash between them gives us a synthesis. In this case, modern physics. And the synthesis takes the truth from both sides to create a newer, better picture. In that new picture, it just becomes the next thesis, and the whole spiral starts all over again.
To really get how wild this was, you have to look at what came before. For centuries, thanks to Aristotle, we thought of reality as a bunch of separate, static things. A car is a car, a rock is a rock, A equals A. Simple. But Hegel came along and said, nope, you're looking at it all wrong. He said reality isn't a collection of things at all. It's one single, flowing, dynamic process. Truth isn't some fixed thing you find. Truth is what emerges and becomes real as it develops. That's a huge shift. Okay, so we've got the key. We understand the theory. Now let's actually use it to unlock a few things in our own world. We'll start with two big ones, modern physics and high-stakes finance. Now check this out. For hundreds of years, classical physics taught us that the scientist is totally separate from the experiment. You just watch reality unfold. But Hegel, just using logic, argued that the observer and the observed actually co-create reality. Fast forward to the 20th century, and quantum physics proves him right. The very act of measuring a quantum particle changes its state. It's literally just a cloud of possibilities until we look at it. It's this bizarre dance between us and the world that Hegel's logic somehow predicted. And this pattern isn't just in a physics lab. Let's leap over to the world of finance. The legendary investor George Soros has a famous saying that sounds like it was ripped right out of a Hegel textbook. He says, markets don't just reflect reality, they create it. Soros calls his theory reflexivity, but let's be honest, it's the dialectic in a business suit. An investor's belief that a stock will go up, that's your thesis. This belief makes them buy the stock, which pushes the price up. That's the antithesis, an action that changes things. This new higher price then creates a new reality that seems to prove the original belief was right, which encourages more buying. That's the synthesis. This is the engine that drives bubbles and busts. It's a real-world dialectical spiral with billions of dollars on the line. You know, one of the best ways to test an idea is to see how its enemies attack it. And here's where it gets really interesting. It turns out, even the people who tried their best to tear Hegel down couldn't help but use his own tools to do it. Case in point, Karl Marx, probably Hegel's most famous student and critic. Marx said, "Hegel, you got it all backward. It's not ideas that drive history, it's the material world, economics." For Marx, the thesis was the factory owners, the antithesis was the working class, and their inevitable clash would produce a new synthesis, a revolution. But wait a second, do you see it? The structure is identical. He didn't disprove the dialectic at all. He just put a different label on it. By trying to invert Hegel, he was still playing Hegel's game, which, ironically, just shows you how powerful the pattern really is.
All right, let's take our key and try it on one of the oldest, most locked doors in all of philosophy, the fight between free will and determinism. Are we actually making our own choices, or is everything already mapped out for us?
Hegel's answer is a real head-scratcher at first. He says freedom is the insight into necessity. Now, hold on. What does that even mean? Aren't freedom and necessity, total opposites? So Hegel flips our whole idea of freedom on its head. Think about it like a game of chess. A beginner who just moves pieces around randomly isn't free. They're just a victim of chaos, enslaved by their own ignorance of the game. But a grandmaster? Someone who understands the rules, the logic, the structure of chess so deeply that they can see 10 moves ahead? That person is truly free. They can be creative, strategic, and purposeful because they've mastered the system's necessities. For Hegel, real freedom isn't about breaking the rules of reality. It's about understanding those rules so well that you can work with them to get what you want. You achieve freedom through the structure, not by escaping it.
Okay, this next one might be the most surprising use of Hegel's key yet. As it turns out, this German philosopher, with his super-rational system, accidentally built a bridge between Western logic and some of the deepest ideas in Eastern spirituality. The similarities here are just incredible. In Eastern traditions like Vedanta and Buddhism, the ultimate goal, reached through things like meditation, is the realization that thou art that. It means your little individual self, your ego, is basically an illusion. Your true identity is one and the same with the entire universe. The path is to let go of that separate ego to realize this unity. Now look at Hegel. He comes at it from a completely different direction, pure step-by-step logic, and he concludes that our individual mind is just a small, temporary part of a greater, universal spirit. And for him, the path to truth is to logically negate our limited self, to realize we're part of this bigger process. It's the same destination reached by two totally different paths. Okay, we're at the home stretch. We're going to bring it all together by tackling Hegel's most famous and most misunderstood idea, absolute knowledge. We're going to clarify what it actually means for you, now that you're holding this key. Right, so when you hear absolute knowledge, it's easy to think it means like becoming a god who knows every single fact about everything. That's not it at all. That's a total myth. For Hegel, absolute knowledge isn't about knowing all the stuff in the universe. It's about finally understanding the process, that dialectical, spiraling pattern of development that we've been talking about this whole time. It's the ability to see the engine of reality at work everywhere you look. So the huge takeaway from all this isn't about adding a bunch of new facts to your memory banks. It's not about what you know. It's about how you know. It's about getting a new operating system for your brain. A new way of seeing. This key gives you the tools to look at conflict not as a dead end, but as the very thing that creates growth and progress. The dialectic is everywhere. So, this is where I turn it over to you. Now that you have this key, what's going to change? What argument at work or struggle in your own life or conflict you see out in the world will you now see differently? Not as just a problem to be solved, but as a chance for a new synthesis to be born. Now that you have the key, what patterns are you going to unlock?